The term food addiction, or more specifically, sugar addiction, is something that comes up often, especially when I'm talking to clients. A lot of times people say, oh, I'm addicted to sugar. I can't have it in the house because I'm addicted to sugar. But you actually can't be addicted to sugar. Now, I totally understand it may feel like you're addicted to sugar, but that has a lot of other factors with your intake that are making you feel like you're addicted to sugar. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but in the literature, as it pertains to food addiction and sugar addiction, they really haven't been able to find anything in human studies. Now, there's been a few studies that correlate sugar to a reward response, that you do feel happy when you eat sugar, kind of like when you see a puppy or something like that. But when they've done research into humans, they haven't really been able to find anything. Now, there's actually more research in the rodents on sugar addiction, but you can't compare a human to a rodent. But let's talk about what they've found in some of these rodent models just real quick. So in the rodent models of finding out if these rodents could be addicted to sugar, they did do the comparison between an IV drug and sugar and found that it was very different. One of the biggest things they noticed in the rodent models is they did have some addiction-like behaviors, meaning they would binge the sugar when it was restrictive, and they did go for the sugar that was sweeter, not necessarily more calorically dense. But in all of the studies, that was also after a period of fasting. In most research studies that they've done with rodents and trying to figure out if they're addicted to sugar, is they deprive them of it. They deprive them of it and then they give them sugar, and the rat does binge on the sugar. But in studies that they've done where they have open access to the sugar, the rats don't really go for it. Now, again, you really can't compare oftentimes humans to rats, but I think that this study that I just referenced is really interesting because we see that similar behavior in humans a lot of the time. When you restrict foods, you're a lot more likely to binge on them. So when it comes to sugar addiction, a lot of times what I see is people feel like they're addicted to sugar, but then when we break down what they're actually eating in a day, they're not eating enough calories, or most notably, they're not eating enough protein. So oftentimes what I see is that someone will have a very small breakfast, a pretty moderate lunch, and by the time 4 o'clock rolls around, they've only eaten maybe 800 to 1,000 calories at most. Sometimes it's way less than that. They've only eaten about 500 calories by 4 p.m. And so then at 4, they start looking for something sweet. Now, that's not because you're addicted to sugar and at 4 p.m. you're just so used to having sugar. It's because you haven't eaten enough earlier in the day. Now, I know I've mentioned this in lots of different case study videos, but what we want to do in that case is front load your calories. We want you to get a good calorically dense breakfast in, something that's got plenty of calories and plenty of protein. Aim for like 30 grams of protein at that breakfast, and then do something similar for lunch, and maybe even have a mid-morning snack between breakfast and lunch, depending on how far apart they are. And then I would be curious if you're still craving that sugar in the evenings. Now, the other thing to note about sugar addiction is you do need to give yourself permission to eat sugar. When you tell yourself that sugar's bad and you're never allowed to eat it, and you treat it as this forbidden fruit, then yes, it's going to be like in the rat model. When you restrict it and tell yourself it's bad and you haven't had sugar in 6 months, you're likely going to binge on that pack of cookies if you do allow yourself to buy it. So if you give yourself just full permission to eat sugar whenever you want to, it decreases that novelty. Now, I'm not saying that you should eat sugar all day, every day. We want to do what I was just talking about with a calorically dense, heavy protein breakfast, lunch, all of those things. But just the mentality of shifting that thought that, I could go eat ice cream right now and there's no big deal, really helps with feeling like you have that sugar addiction. Most cases, sugar addiction stems from restriction. Biologically speaking, in the research, you can't be addicted to sugar. So if you feel like you are, I think it's really important that you evaluate what you're eating. Go work with a dietitian. Make sure that you're taking in enough protein, enough calories, enough carbs, fats, veggies, all of those other things throughout your day. And then let's talk about where sugar comes in your life and why it feels like you're addicted to it. Guys, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.